I didn't want to do it at first, and they'd been after me to do one for about 2 years. And I thought, well, you know, there's going to be 22,000 people there, so we can throw in some new songs maybe and everything. But as it turned out, we didn't. We played all old songs, and they just sort of stared at us. And it was a strange experience, really. It was about 6 months ago.
Everyone thought Ricky Nelson was poor when he died in that 1985 plane crash. It cost him $1 million to get divorced. He owed money to everyone. His children were going to get nothing but debt when he died. Then his brother found a will that had been hidden. And the lawyers found something shocking. For many years, record companies stole from him. The next thing that happened made all 4 of his kids rich. The payment amounts were so huge that the judge couldn't believe them. One son, though, didn't get anything. Will make you drop your head. Ricky Nelson was born in Teaneck, New Jersey, on May 8, 1940. He wasn't like other kids, though. Ozzie Nelson, his dad, was in charge of a big band. In the movies, his mother, Harriet Hilliard, was already a star. His life has been open to the world since the beginning. Ozzie and Harriet, his family's radio show, was already well known all over America when he was still in diapers. Ricky didn't grow up in a quiet neighborhood. He did it in recording studios and sound stages. Family meals could become practices. Trips were sometimes turned into plays. It was like living in a spotlight all the time. Everything, even the most normal things, felt like they were planned. Ricky started the radio show with his brother David when he was only 8 years old in 1949. At his age, most boys would trade baseball cards or ride their bikes, but Ricky would memorize lines and cash checks. A star rose to his feet before he turned 10. People loved the way he spoke naturally, and by the time he was 10, he was a well-known person. But being famous cost him something. Nobody had a birthday party or played sports with their friends. There are only lights, cameras, and duty. Ricky wasn't able to be a kid. He had a room as a play area. In many ways, his childhood was given up for the family name. The family moved to Los Angeles in 1941 and lived in a cute green and white Cape Cod house at 1822 Camino Palmero. That house was more than just a home. It turned into the face of American TV. It became one of the most famous houses in pop culture after being in so many episodes of the show. Some fans drove by just to catch a look, but there was a business going on inside those walls. There, scripts were written. The living room was where the practices took place. The kids worked for Ozzie and helped him run the business like a tight ship. Their real lives were very connected to the roles they played on TV and movies. The show was a huge hit because it mixed fiction and truth, but it made things hard for Ricky. What was real and what was just for show? Ricky also had a lot of trouble with breathing. It wasn't just a few coughing fits here and there. It made him stay home from school and away from his friends. He would get out of breath just walking across the room. Ricky stayed inside and read while the other kids played, or just making songs. It made him quiet and think. He watched more than he talked. He would later use this quiet side of himself as part of his charm. On screen, he stood out because of his quiet force, but behind it was a kid who was alone and just wanted to breathe and feel normal. Ozzie and Harriet hired players to play their sons when the radio show started in 1944. David and Ricky didn't like that. They wanted to play themselves and pushed for it. They were the stars of the show as themselves by 1949. It wasn't really done before. It was a weird mix of real family life and fun, but it worked. Ratings went up, and everyone became crazy about the Nelsons. It wasn't just a role for Ricky. Every day, he was living it. His real life became well known, and fans loved reading about it. It was the first reality family in the U.S. That became a genre decades ago. Then, 1957 came along. Ricky was 17 years old when he sang I'm Walkin' by Fats Domino on his family's TV show. It was exciting. Girls all over the United States swooned. More than 1 million copies of the songs were sold. He became the face of teen cool overnight. But Ricky's life was already becoming much more adult, away from the screen. Events, girls, and fast cars. Ricky walked through all of the doors that fame opened for him. In interviews, he was nice, but behind the scenes, he was rude and wild. He slicked back his hair and let his sideburns grow out. Little rebellions that made his parents mad because they still wanted to be in charge. In late that same year, Bebop Baby, his first song with Imperial Records, became a big deal. It got 750,000 pre-orders before it even came out in shops. When it did, it sold over 1 million copies right away and made it into the top 5 on both the pop and R&B lists. Ricky was no longer just a teen hero, he was a big deal. Ricky, his first record, was a big hit. All of a sudden, being young and pretty wasn't just cute, it was money. Record companies saw money in every kid with a guitar, and Ricky showed them that it could be done. But Ricky was also in serious relationships, some of which would have shocked his fans if they knew about them. One of them was with Marianne Gaba, who played his TV girlfriend. Things were hot off-screen. Later, Ricky said they would neck for hours, which was a surefire way to cause trouble in the 1950s. Even better, he gave her a gold ring that said, "To Marianne, love Rick." She believed it meant they were serious. He didn't. Ricky was already seeing other women, like singer Lori Collins, with whom he began writing songs. The people thought he was perfect, but Ricky was really a youngster living life fast, and not many people knew the truth. All of this scared his parents a lot. Ozzie and Harriet were more than just parents. They made things, managed things, and kept things out. They didn't like how many women Ricky had. They thought that love would make him lose focus. Most of all, Ozzie was strict. Ricky was making $500 a week by the time he was 13 or 14, but his dad kept the money. It wasn't much money for Ricky. His dad didn't want him to be spoiled. He had that much power over his personal life, too. There were no longer any rumors of marriages. It was frowned upon to have serious relationships. But Ricky started to fight because he was already used to being famous and under a lot of pressure. Parties late at night and secret lovers. He was still the face of the TV family that everyone loved. Behind the scenes, though, he was getting farther away from their control. Ricky Nelson's first record went straight to #1 when he was only 17. The record came out in October 1957 and was just called Ricky. It blew up the charts very quickly and stayed at the top of the Billboard LP chart for 2 weeks. At the time, he was the youngest artist to ever do that. Some teens were singing catchy songs, but this wasn't just that. Ricky was already a TV star because of The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which is one of the most watched shows in the U.S. A lot of people saw him sing and act every week. Elvis and other stars ruled the radio, but Ricky was in charge of the living room and the broadcasts. Peppy songs and Have I Told You Lately That I Love You. Before the record even came out, they were already going up the charts. It wasn't luck that made him successful, he had a plan. The person who planned that method was his father, Ozzie Nelson. As the manager of their family's TV show, Ozzie saw a chance that no one else did. Ricky would sing a brand new song at the end of every show. It wasn't just cute, it was brilliant. It was seen by 10 million people every week. There was a lot of publicity. In April 1957, Ricky sang I'm Walkin' on the show, and the song went straight to #4 on the charts. Its B-side, A Teenager's Romance, got even better and went to #2. That kind of effect had never been seen before. In the story, Ozzie made sure that Ricky's songs were important, and he had a tight grip on where Ricky showed up. It was so bad that he wouldn't even let him go on E.T. Why let anyone else shine when they could have it all to themselves? After that came Poor Little Fool. It was the first song ever to top Billboard's brand new Hot 100 chart in August 1958. That would have been history on its own, but there's more. Sharon Sheeley, who is 15 years old, wrote the song. Ricky wrote it down, not wanting to. Radio stations loved it even though it wasn't meant to be a hit. Imperial Records put it out anyway, even though Ricky was against it. It went straight to #1 and stayed there for 2 weeks. It also made it to the country and R&B charts. That moment made Ricky's place in music permanent. It still makes money for his heirs. A lot of people have covered the song, but no one else can ever be #1 on the Hot 100. Ricky will always have that title. Ricky had 20 songs in the top 40 between 1957 and 1962. At that time, only Elvis had more. It sold more than 1 million copies as his first song with Imperial Records. You could pre-order it 750,000 times before it even came out. His deal was just as crazy. He will get $50,000 every year for 5 years and have full power over his songs and album art. That was never going to happen to a teenager. Also, the money from those hits kept coming in. His songs kept coming up on TV. The Ricky Nelson International Fan Club had 9,000 groups around the world by 1960. Ricky wasn't just rich, he was everywhere. He showed he could act too in 1959. In the movie Rio Bravo, he was in it with John Wayne and Dean Martin. It was his part as Colorado Ryan that got him nominated for a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. But even though his playing was praised, there was something else that stood out. What he spent. Ricky had a great time, made-to-measure clothes, fancy cars, and VIP clubs. He was going out with the best people in Hollywood. It was said that he got $5,000 every month. That's about $50,000 these days. That part helped his business, but it also showed that he liked living the high life. Not only did fame make him money, it also changed him. A funny thing is that 1961 also gave him one of his biggest hits, Travelin' Man. But Sam Cooke turned it down first. He didn't think it was right for him. Ricky was brave and it turned out to be a good idea. In April, the song became a hit and quickly sold more than 1 million copies. Hello Mary Lou, the B-side, also did well. One song with 2 huge hits. Ricky could hear songs that other people didn't. Before everything changed, it was one of the last big wins. In the background, he was getting angry. The older musicians who played on his records didn't like rock and roll. Some people wouldn't play the way he wanted. Someone even told him, "Kid, this isn't music." Ricky fired them. He got young players who believed in the sound he was going for to form his own band. It cost him a lot in wages, gear, and travel, but he was in charge. And James Burton joined the band. Burton would go on to become a star in his own right. It wasn't just sound, it had to do with respect. Ricky was sick of being like a doll, but nothing could stop what was about to happen. The Beatles came to America in 1964 like a tsunami. Everything changed when they went on The Ed Sullivan Show in February. They had all 5 of the top spots on the Billboard chart by April. Elvis had trouble. Everyone else did the same thing. Ricky wasn't any different. In that year, his song For You just barely made it into the top 40. The magic was starting to fade. The British invasion changed more than just the music. It also changed the rules. Rick Nelson met Chris Harmon, 16, on Christmas Day, 1961. Harmon was 16 years old and already a movie star. He was 21 years old. She was the daughter of famous football player Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox. Her brother Mark Harmon would become a TV star. There was no doubt that they would make a great Hollywood pair. Well-known, beautiful, and raised in the public eye. That dream turned into a long nightmare, though. From the start, Rick was under a lot of stress. His father, Ozzie, was in charge of his money. Chris wanted to live a fancy life because he grew up in a fancy family. Rick tried to keep up, but the money kept going out. Every year, he spent all of his money on homes, cars, expensive clothes, and trips to faraway places. Rick was poor by the late 1970s. The fairy tale had come to an end. It wasn't very romantic when they got married on April 20th, 1963. It was a wedding with a gun. Chris was already pregnant, and her Catholic parents pushed for a wedding with no food or drink. Rick, who wasn't Catholic, had to sign an official promise that they would teach their children the faith. He didn't choose it. It was an order. To keep the peace, he had to go to Catholic school and do what everyone else did. On the outside, the wedding looked like a party, but behind the scenes, it was all about control, putting on a show for everyone. That stress never built up. It's weird that Rick's parents liked Chris. They turned down every other girl he dated except her. They were so happy to connect the families of Nelson and Harmon. Chris seemed like the right kind of person, classy, well-connected, and from Hollywood royalty. At first, it looked like they were a great match, but that quickly changed. Rick had always followed his dad's strict rules about money, but now his wife wanted everything that money could buy. They did not make a plan, they just spent. The bills didn't go away when Rick's job stopped going well in the mid-1970s. Chris wanted him to come home more. Rick had to keep going on tour. His emotions and money were both stretched thin. The marriage that everyone used to admire finished with a $1 million court bill. Chris even went on Ozzie and Harriet's adventures with Rick after they got married. She made money by playing herself on the show. We spent more when we had 2 paychecks, though. They both didn't know how to save. There were agents, assistants, and lawyers all around them. However, no one stopped the blood loss. Rick used to follow his father's strict rules about money, but now he was spending all of it to keep up with his busy life. Chris began to pull away because he felt stuck in a fake TV world and a marriage that was falling apart. They were too far gone by that time. The Hollywood dream turned into a slow-motion crash in the stock market. Rick and Chris worked together to make the movie Love and Kisses in 1965. It was run by his father. The story was about 2 teens who run away together and have a hard time living with the groom's parents. The story was funny, but the truth was very sad. Their work was already affected by the problems they were having in real life. Some critics thought it was a great choice of actors. Not many people knew how true the story was, though. Played a high school student, even though he was 25 years old. Chris didn't get much credit for his work. Behind the scenes, they were having trouble with their marriage. Ozzie used the movie to deal with personal problems, showing personal drama in a way that was more painful than funny. It was odd, uncomfortable, and a sign. Rick was dying to get away from the past by 1969. He changed himself by putting together the Stone Canyon Band, which mixed country and rock music before it was cool to do so. Randy Meisner later joined the Eagles because of what he did. The band had promise, but they were not on the right time. Rick used to play big places as the main act, but now he plays small clubs for little money. Meisner quit because he wasn't making any money and felt like he had no choice. Rick Sings Nelson and In Concert were ahead of their time, but they didn't sell very well. Rick was looking for artistic freedom while his money and fame were going away. It didn't matter what it took for him to show that he was a seriously good guitarist, and it almost did. Then the moment that broke him was here. October 15th, 1971. Madison Square Garden is a rock and roll show. Rick thought he would get love, but instead he got booed. His goal was to try a new sound by taking the Y out of Ricky. He played women from honky tonks. People in the room wanted the old hits. Some people said it wasn't about the music. They blamed what the cops did in the crowd. Rick thought the message was clear, though. They did not want the new song. He felt bad about himself after leaving the stage and watched the rest of the show from behind the scenes. He was eventually persuaded to play the old songs again. People in the crowd finally cheered, but it was too late. Something in him broke that night. But a surprise came out of that mess. Rick wrote Garden Party in 1972. It was about them. It was real. It was true. It was all said in the chorus. You have to make yourself happy because you can't make everyone else happy. That song made me feel something. It went gold and got to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rick came back for a short time. It was his first top 10 hit in almost 10 years. Fans who didn't think much of him before started singing along, but it didn't last. Palace Guard and other songs that came after it didn't do well. His record company didn't know what to do with him by 1974. Albums like Windfall didn't do well. He started to play in amusement parks and got small parts on TV, but MCA dropped him. Garden Party turned into both a win and a goodbye. He used to be the star of American pop music, but by the middle of the 1970s, he had lost control of his life. It looked like his marriage to Chris Nelson was holding together, but it wasn't. Rick was always on the road, trying to keep up with their fancy way of life. Private schools, fancy homes, and a lot of bills. But the more he worked, the farther away he got. Chris felt left out. Rick felt suffocated. The house they worked so hard on together turned into a battlefield as their arguments turned into fights. After another long trip in 1977, Rick came home to a warm house. Instead, he was locked out. Chris had moved all of his things into a rental house. When he got there, she and 2 Los Angeles Rams dancers were already there. Was shocked and embarrassed. That moment made it clear. You couldn't go back. Chris said she did it to protect the kids and blamed Rick's drug use. What Rick's team said was not true, but the damage was already done. Their marriage was too broken to fix. They tried again in 1980. Richard bought Errol Flynn's old house on Mulholland Drive for $750,000. He planned to start over there, but Chris told him he had to stop making songs and become an actor. Rick wasn't able to. He had so much debt that he had to go on tour just to stay alive. The house didn't make things better. It made things more stressful. It was said to be visited by ghosts. Sounds were made, lights flickered, and the family kept losing money. The dream house turned into a bad dream. Things got bad in the breakup. Chris said Rick used drugs and wasn't a good parent. She said that if she stayed, their kids would die. Rick hit back, saying she was abusing drink and leaving the kids with the staff. It took 5 years for the court case to end. It cost more than $1 million just for lawyers. No one was able to handle their feelings.